Hello everybody and welcome to another Frank and Stan chat. I've had Stan confirm that this is edition number 47. We got it wrong last week. We lost count. But anyway, as you can see, we've got a guest with us today, and it's Jonny Mitchell. And we'll let Jonny introduce himself in a second or two. But first of all, let's go to Stan and say, hello, Stan, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. What a horrible morning.
It's absolutely lacking
down with rain.
Yeah.
And apparently raining in your house, Frank, is it?
Well, it is, yeah, not related to the rain. It's we don't have a combi boiler. We have a hot water tank, and I think that tank is leaking. So I've turned off all the taps that I can find, but it's still streaming through. But we've got a plumber coming, so if he comes halfway through and I disappear, I think that drip's coming ahead of you. It's a bigger drip than you, Stan. Anyway, hello, Jonny. Thank you for joining us.
Hiya, how are you doing?
Yeah, we're very well. We're very grateful for you to give us some time on what is, I think, the last day of the spring term.
Last day of the spring term for us.
Yeah.
I think it's well overdue, I think, with the year that we've had so far. So.
Yeah. So do you want to, I mean, a lot of people know who you are, but would you like to just introduce yourself and tell those people who don't, why you're here and how we know each other and that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I'm Jonny Mitchell. I'm currently principal at Netherwood Academy, which is a part of the Australia Academies Trust in Barnsley. I've only been here since September, so I've not really seen the school in normal circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's a really unusual way to join a new job, certainly as the principal or the head. So I am excited to see what it's like under a semblance of normality. Prior to that, I was 5 very happy years at Co-op Academy Leeds, which is where I know Frank from. Frank was CEO at the time of my appointment. We shared many philosophical and indeed non-philosophical.
Yeah, some ups and downs, but always ended sort of, we were always very positive with each other, I think, and realised the scale of the challenge and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I loved working with Co-op, and I loved Co-op Academy Leeds, and yeah, and I still miss it. Often when you move, you miss it for a couple of months and then you don't, because you've got a new challenge. And much as I love the role here, and I really do, I do miss my time at the Co-op, and I look back on it always fondly. And prior to that, I was my first headship. Some would say my first naive headship, when I was thrust into the television limelight by a cult Channel 4 programme that most people didn't watch, called Educating Yorkshire. And I'm here because I was invited, although I did ask on a few occasions whether or not I could get in before number 47, although I don't mind number 47. It's a prime number, so it's in its way special.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you, and I think what we do is we have this little slot called what's called Your Eye. So what I'll do is I'll go to Stan, then to you, Jonny, and then I've got a slightly odd one. So what's caught your eye this week, Stan?
Well, it's the children's minister yesterday rewriting history. In fact, Marcus Rashford only supported what they were doing. They were already on with all this, the free school meals over holidays and holiday clubs and all that. It was already been discussed and planned. So Marcus Rashford, she was pleased that Marcus Rashford supported it.
But didn't a number of ministers vote against that proposal?
It did.
So I'm trying to work out.
She voted against it because there were other things that were already in the pipeline.
Oh, I see.
None of which would have fed the children over that half term.
Right.
But hey,
Marcus managed to get that managed to make that happen.
No, he supported them in doing it.
So I got it wrong again.
Don't
I must listen more
carefully.
carefully.
Credibility for this. It was the children's minister. Just a quick rewriting of the history in, less than a year, hoping everyone's really forgotten what actually happened.
But do you think people out there actually believe that?
No.
I mean, just thinking about who is that? Who is receiving that message and actually going, oh yeah, I think that minister's right. Are there people out there that understand that?
I think there probably are, and I think it's this tribal approach that we've now got.
Yes.
That you're either in one camp or the other, and whatever your camp says, you believe, and whatever the other camp says, it's fake news or
yeah, distorted.
Don't let facts get in the way, though.
No, well, I did see a tweet. I mean, from Wes Streeting, the shadow education minister, who said, "This is political," but I only found it funny. You know, I've got to be careful what I say here. But actually, he said a tweet. He said, "You know, when Boris Johnson's lying, his mouth is open." So, but anyway, Jonny, what's caught your eye this week?
Quite a lot of things. Line of Duty obviously caught my eye, but that's not really.
Oh yeah.
But it's fab. It was brilliant. I suppose the thing that I've been focusing on, obviously being really close to where I live, is what's been going on at Batley Grammar School with the emergence of the protests outside at the blasphemy lesson.
Yeah.
And it always irks me a little bit when that sort of thing happens, because, you know, I'm looking at it from you always look at it from a leadership point of view. You know, whatever people might say about whether or not the head teacher could have been in more control of what was in the curriculum, you know, nobody can legislate for a maverick teacher sometimes. And,
no.
and again, maybe the teacher hasn't been maverick, it's pending investigation and we don't know what the ins and outs are. And I'd never want to hazard a guess because I know how dangerous that can be. But throughout all of that, I was trying to look at some of the polemic around it, and people on one side saying this, people on the other side saying that, and all I did was sort of shrink back a little bit in my driver's seat when I was listening to it on the radio, thinking, God, what's that head teacher going through right now?
I know.
He really didn't ask for this. He really doesn't want to be responding to this sort of thing with all the other things that are going on around in society and in schools. And I just really feel for him. And actually, I then thought he's obviously having really good advice about how to respond to it.
Well, yeah, I was struck by that. I was
really well.
I know. I agree. I was going to make the same point that he came over in a very measured, considered way. He'd obviously he's either a natural, you know, or he's had some good training as to how to manage that. And it's interesting, the work I'm doing in Blackpool at the moment, a lot of the stuff we did in the co-op around comms and all of that stuff, the Joe Dundas side of it, Joe and I have produced a video where we just talking through our journey in terms of, you know, trying to improve, you know, communications across sort of 20 odd schools. And a lot of people in Blackpool, a lot of leaders in Blackpool are very interested in that journey, because it's something they get very little training on before they become a head teacher. And this guy in Batley, you know, he is a natural if he hasn't had the training. You know, I'm really impressed with it.
You have to become a natural overnight, I suppose, when it's not disaster, obviously, it's not a catastrophe, but, you know, difficulty and, you know, national spotlight. You know, you expect when, you know, a little town like Batley or Dewsbury, you expect if something happens, it might make the local rag, but it's a really burning issue. It's quite interesting when we were talking about the co-op approach to PR, because it's obviously part of a huge organisation. PR is really important, marketing, values, vision, etc., etc. And obviously, I'd had a bit of media training prior to that. And I remember when I came on interview at Co-op, Dave Smith came in, and I think I had 45 minutes set aside for a reporter who was going to say, if you don't respond to this in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to publish a lot of lies about your academy. And Dave was there waiting for me to say, and he came in and he went, right, what have you got to say? And I said, well, I've pre-prepared a statement which I'll read out, and if you want to contact the press office. I thought, well, I've got 40 minutes left, I can go and have a cup of tea. And then a couple of years in, my VP, Caroline Foster, she signed up for a sort of co-op PR marketing communications training. And I remember she came back, she came back and she was sweating cobs. It was horrific. I got off the train and they were practically at Piccadilly with microphones thrust in my face, throwing things at me. And but it's really interesting having gone through it with the Educating Yorkshire stuff and having to go through that. Don't answer the question. Yes. And if you do answer the question, say that there are other views available, and don't commit to anything. Don't say anything's a fact. And that doesn't come naturally to me, because I don't think you know me as well as anybody, Frank, in a professional sense. I do like to say it how it is, and I find myself biting my tongue on occasions and saying the right thing. And I think I've got, well, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I've got better at that with age and experience. But it's always something. It's one of the trickiest things I think there is in leadership, especially when somebody's trying to get some information from you. You want to share with them, but you really know you can't.
Yeah.
I think we did some training with it, and it was with the music service. And one of the things I learned from that was this, which you can see with all politicians now, is what they call bridging. So you tell them it's a really good question, but then you say, but the important thing is, and then you say what you were going to say anyway, regardless of what the question was.
Yeah.
And you can see politicians do it all the time. That's a fantastic question, and really deserves, I was looking into it. But the important thing is I'm doing X, Y, and Z.
It's funny, at the cricket club, as a guy there who actually is, I think he's vice chair or something, Phil. And but he's a liquidator, and he was responsible for the liquidation of MFI. And I remember driving to Liverpool one morning, and Phil came on Radio 4, and Radio 4 asked him 4 questions, and he gave the same answer back on each of the questions. So in a way, I think I was taught, you've got, say, 2 things you want to get across. So every question you get, you focus in on those 2 answers, because people only remember a couple of things, so just stick with the same response, try and get it into the question, into your answer.
Yeah.
I
think it's important you explain liquidation there, because it wouldn't be the liquidation of MFI, would it be the dismantling? I think
dismantling, yes.
Yeah. But I've had a few sort of interludes on local radio and things like that over the past 6 months. Obviously, I'm a bit of a go-to sometimes for local radio, and that's fine. And it's great for me to be able to profile Netherwood, as well as keep myself in the profile for the good of the school and the community. But again, I work with someone that said, they're going to ask you this. They want to talk to you about centre assessed grades or something like that, but they'll want to ask you about, don't you think they're handling it wrong, and just avoid it. And I think it's really difficult, because I've got opinions on this. Yeah. I want to tell you, but in sort of my public office, if you like, it'd be politically biased and things like that. And again, I find that really difficult. But just saying, I want to tell you the answer to the question. I know I know that the answer to the question, and I'd love to have a private chat with you and tell you what I really, really think. But this is the party line. We just want our kids to get the best grades possible, and we just want to make sure that this happens, and there's no political fallout whatsoever, and we're not in league or in conflict. That's my case.
My problem was my one-liners afterwards, and the guy eventually came to me and said, "Look, the camera is never off.
Yeah,
the camera's never off. The microphone's never off." And he said, after we'd finished the training, he said, "Let me just show you a couple of clips of what we've got of you saying." And it was a off-the-cuff joke about children. And he said, "Imagine if we showed this clip out of context on the local news." And it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
It was just a gag at the end of a serious conversation. But he said, just, you need to remember the camera's never off.
Well, it's the Gordon Brown bigot, isn't it? Sort of story. I think that always comes to mind. Let me just tell you about my one. It's actually what's caught my ear. Obviously, I was telling you before, but we've got a leak from our water system upstairs, which is leaking into the front room. I can see the ceiling in the front room sort of dipping, so it's bad news. So the plumber's due shortly. But the thing for me was around, I was listening. I listened to the Peter Crouch podcast. I don't know if either of you get to it, but they were talking recently about the liaison officer at football clubs, where you get a star player comes in, and there's somebody there who looks after them, and so the sort of jobs that they end up doing. But it made me think really about, I know we talk about equality and stuff like that, but I think there have been occasions when I've appointed somebody, and actually I've probably sort of treated them slightly differently to other staff members, because I want it to work really well, so I think that's affected sort of my relationship with that person. I'm thinking perhaps I was a bit like a liaison officer, where I was trying to, do everything to make sure that the appointment landed successfully. And I wondered then, how did the other staff feel, when actually they think, well, he never did that for me, did he? I wondered if you had either of you had similar sort of feelings or situations like that.
I think my facial expression says it all.
Well, I don't want to land you in here, Jonny.
No, but you get occasionally you spot someone that you think you absolutely have to work in this organisation. And I think you do probably court them a little bit, and you know, try and entice them, and even embellish the merits of joining you. And I think it's almost subconscious. I think somewhere in there, you know what you're doing, and you're trying to. You perhaps, well, I certainly do. I perhaps go a little bit overboard, and I'm over effusive in my description of the school which I lead. Is say, oh yes, we were amazing at this. Actually, we're not particularly good. But we get in there, but we're amazing at this, and you're going to really fit in well here because you see something in them that could be great going forward, and perhaps you don't do that with us. So I recognise it. I couldn't nail down any specific incidents, but it's probably happened 3 or 4 times.
What about you, Stan?
I can't think of. I mean, I think you do naturally. I mean, I've done it when, particularly, I'm going to get this all wrong if I say, but I particularly like to find people who are early in their careers.
Yeah.
That I think, yeah, you've got something, and support them and help them. But sometimes others see that in a different light altogether, and you have favourites and you're picking favourites, etc. But I'm pleased to say I've seen people grow and become. I mean, when I was in teaching, I think there were 4 of my staff went on to be head teachers, which I was really proud about. But also when I was working for the local authority, seeing people come in as just administrators and go out 5, 6 years later as senior financial managers because you've put the time and effort in and the training is fantastic.
Yeah.
I just worry that now I still want to take them and put them somewhere where they could make a real difference. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm conscious of the fact that there's some data out this week, wasn't there, about you know, minority groups getting through to senior leadership roles, and actually I do think we need to think about how we can encourage, you know, so there is a fine line, isn't there, I think, between the encouragement and the favouring. You know, I think we need to encourage more and to open up opportunities so that everybody from every community can get through to the role that, say, Johnny's got here or I've got, you know, that actually we need greater diversity there. And actually, if we carry on doing what we're doing, we're probably not going to get it. So we do need to be being much more open, much more encouraging for those colleagues to find a way through, because it must be harder for them as well. You know, I mean, not wanting to sort of suggest there is inherent bias, but you never know who you've got on your appointment panel, for example. If you're a governing, you know, you don't know whether, you know, you get 6 or 7 governors at a senior appointment. Actually, you know, what's going on in their heads? You know, you've got to fight against that and encourage it. So anyway, I'm interested. Again, tweeted this yesterday about, you know, has it behaviour? Three senior leaders, I would say not in the co-op, I say that, or in Blackpool, spoke to me about how tough it's been since the kids came back on the 8th of March in terms of behaviour. And everybody has responded to that tweet saying, yeah, the kids have been brilliant, but there are some deeper issues that are emerging. So I don't know if that's an experience you've had, Johnny, at your academy. I think both ends of that argument. I think some, and obviously it's a bit more difficult for me to gauge because I didn't have the benchmark because I wasn't really here. Did spend a bit of time here, but we were in lockdown in the summer in any case. So I didn't see what the overall fabric of behaviour looked like prior to the 1st of September. But my experience is that some students have come back and found being back in school challenging, and that has manifested itself in some derailed behaviour on occasions. And I think some staff will probably feel that, you know, things could be better, but there are various avenues and various sanctions or various opportunities that we can't tap into currently because of capacity issues or space issues or issues with mixing, contaminating, cross-contamination or whatever you want to call it. But I think some others have come back and pleasantly surprised in that they don't want to be homeschooled anymore. They don't want to be in lockdown. They don't want to be separated from their friends. And they've come back with a renewed sense of purpose and maybe, dare I say, a newfound respect for the education system and the fact that they've been given this education, because in some of their cases, they would think because mum and dad aren't very good at it. Mum and dad are not supposed to be very good at it, I suppose. Mum and dad have got jobs to do, or etc., etc. I think that's probably a small number of cases.
So, but I would suggest that it probably is more testy in schools up and down the land.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think it matters what type of behaviour system you've got in place, or whether you've got a really draconian and to the letter process, or you've got a more restorative process, or a combination of the two. I think children's reactions to having been locked down and in uncertainty for such a long time, I think has probably wrought havoc with a lot of what's going on inside their heads. And I think we do talk about behaviour amongst children, but staff well-being. You know, people. I know I've heard other leaders say, "Oh well, you know, staff are getting on my nerves now because they're whining about this and they're whining about that." Well, actually, you know, I've done more whining in the last 6 months than I've probably ever whined at. Not because I'm whining about what's going on in school, but I struggled. I struggled readapting, and I wasn't out of the building much. But I struggled with routines and expectations, and I think a lot of teachers, leaders and support staff will have done the same. So it's about putting all those factors together and seeing whether or not there is a little, to use a Johnson phrase, if there is a little roadmap that maybe resetting. I mean, we're always talking about reset. We've got another opportunity after the next lockdown came. We had another opportunity for a reset. But actually, kids' resilience has been tested to the limit, and some of them are showing signs of cracking, aren't they? And we have to do everything we can. So hitting with behaviour could be counterintuitive when we're thinking about not trying to knock mental health yet further. And there's a fine balance. And I certainly don't think we've found it, because we need to get the kids back in the building for a sustained period of time before that can happen.
Yeah, but it's not back to normal, is it? I mean, they've come back and it's still not what should be normal. So the routines aren't normal, the classes aren't normal. So it's not quite what they want. What they want, I think, the children via head teachers that I've spoke to want to get back to something that is routine, that they know how it works. And every time we've come back, it's not been like that yet. So there's an additional frustration, I think, in that.
Have you found teachers that have had to adapt, say, the seating arrangements in their classes? You know, for some that's probably, you know, helpful, you know, because that might be what they do anyway, or they wanted to do that. But there are others where that's actually been fundamentally different to the way in which I normally work. I'm thinking really about what I've got in my head is, for example, art studios tend not to be in rows, you know, and you've got then this need to have them in rows. I mean, have you found teachers found that a bit of a struggle?
I think teachers have found, I mean, look, every school made its own decisions about how it would operate a risk assessment. You know, we consulted on a risk assessment, put things in place, spoke to staff and spoke to unions and things like that. And, you know, I think we bottomed out a reasonably good risk assessment, which is robust and is designed to keep people safe. But there's no guarantees. It's certainly not a fail-safe. It's a risk assessment. It's not a risk annihilator. We took the decision early doors when we were coming back in September that year 7, 8 and 9 would all be taught in the same group for all their subjects.
Right.
But we had to play around with the existing curriculum and the existing timetable and the existing staffing structure. I suppose for Key Stage 3, that meant that for 5 hours a day, kids were sat in the same seat with very little movement and no communal breaks and splitting up lunchtimes into small groups. At the outset, we had 5 lunchtimes. You know, when you think a 2.5 hour lunch break is, especially if you're on duty, it's quite a long time.
So have you lost some weight, Johnny?
Sorry?
Have you lost some weight?
I'm about 6 stone 8 at the moment, ringing wet. I have lost some weight. Thanks for noticing.
Oh yeah, you have lost some weight.
I have lost a couple of stone. Yeah. I'll find them again soon.
I've got them if you want them back.
No, you're not kidding. I've got plenty in reserve later on. I'm getting old, you see. I've got my vaccine next week. I must be getting old. So, but yeah, and I think you know, but we needed to offer some flexibility for Key Stage 4 because of certainly in the options subjects and the practical option subjects. You know, banging and clattering and cooking and dancing and drama, all the stuff that you know I'm passionate about anyway, and I love that side of education. I think it's a brilliant vehicle. And I just thought, if we take that away from them for a whole term, no, you're not allowed to do anything practical. No, you can watch a video. No, experience, you'll just have to watch the teacher doing an experiment and that's it. So any chance that we've got of getting kids back into routines and approaching normality is just going to be sapped by the fact that learning is just nowhere near as engaging as it could be. So it was about finding that balance. I think most members of staff have liked the idea that it's all in rows, but the vast majority of classrooms in this particular school are sort of in rows anyway.
Oh, right.
Lots of horseshoe arrangements and various other bits and pieces. So that wasn't a massive issue. But in the practical subjects, no, we haven't adopted that approach. But what we have had to do is adopt an approach where as few children as possible are mixing on a regular basis, so that if a bubble closes, for example, we're talking about a smallish number, you know, a class size, and maybe some lunchtime social contacts or people that they've been in contact with outside. And that's been really tricky. You could almost need like 2 permanent members of staff just to deal with COVID arrangements on top of your existing structure. And it's been, you know, I don't think anybody in senior leadership in education came into it to be a risk assessor. But, you know, you spend a lot of time looking at risks and speaking with public health and the DfE and the local council and with parents. And it's a challenge. And, you know, hats off to everybody who's dealt with it. I have a very able senior vice principal who's been taking all of that responsibility away from me and has led on the COVID response. And I think I look at that as good leadership, because I know that she's the best person for the job. And if I'd have been doing it, I'd probably have lost patience much more quickly, because you know, I am an impatient man on occasions, as you may well remember. And I think it's important that a response to something like a pandemic has to be really sober and really straightforward and really clear and really well articulated. And although I can do all of those things, I think my SVP can do that in spades better than I can. And I've been able to concentrate on some of the other things that are happening in the school that need my attention.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, I mean, believe it or not, we've had nearly 25 minutes of this, gents. So, but I want to just get a sense of a big thing for me has been, I think we've been placed in a situation where I knew that last year the exams would be a mess and that we would end up with teachers having to do the assessments. I knew that in March. And the government were very keen to hold the line. And of course, we got into that same situation in the autumn, hold the line. Now, of course, we've got now the decision made. We still haven't got the guidance sent out from the DfE or from the examination boards, but let's place that to one side. I mean, how are staff coping with that additional burden of having to do that? And also hearing, you know, sort of, I think, very sort of foolish language from MPs this week that it's going to be sort of like free for all, you know, grades are going to go through the roof, you know. I think it's really, really unhelpful language. You know, they might have that view, but it's probably best to keep it to themselves at the moment. How are staff preparing for, you know, the need to do this assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably approaching it like the vast majority of other schools, blindly in the first instance, making assumptions in the second instance, and then as little things drip out of, whether you call them leaks or whether they are officially allowed to be leaked, who cares? Everything that's come out has tended to be backed up within a couple of weeks by some form of guidance or missive. You know, we've kept it very straightforward with staff. Don't talk to parents, don't talk to kids about what grades you're going to award them. You know, it will be malpractice, and there'll be, you know, which although not helpful to say that it will be malpractice, but that's the guidance. And we don't want any of our kids' grades to be jeopardized by people just making flippant
loose talk.
Yeah, loose talk costs lives, apparently. Costs grades in this instance.
Grades,
which is not quite so serious. But you know, Netherwood's in a situation where, you know, historic progress has not been great, and you know, that's recognised. But I think every school wants the best for the kids, and it's about, we've been sort of looking at it with our staff as, look, unconscious bias, really, really careful. It just because they're a nice kid doesn't mean they're going to get a grade higher than a kid that's not being so nice to you. And that's really difficult. It's all right saying, so we've got to put tests in place to make sure that the grades that staff are putting down, and oh, well, he's a nice kid, he does all his work. He says, yeah, but what would you have got in the exam? Well, a 3 at best. Then, well, it's a 3 then, isn't it? What's the work that they've been producing? Well, this is that, and this is that. And I think that the difficulty is, although it's a similar sort of way of arriving at a grade to the previously announced one for the previous exam season, it's actually not the same. Because we are now looking at evidence. We have got the option of these mini tests, and most schools, I think, probably would be advised to do them because that's robust evidence and it will protect a little bit more against parent appeals against the school or student appeals against the school. But it's important that we look at that evidence and say, no, this kid would have got this. But my other point about it, and as I know a few staff have spoken to me about it as well, is I've got this real dilemma, Johnny, because we know that in a traditional summer exam season, let's take English or maths, for example, we know that there are 60 kids who are 3-4 borderline. And we know on a good day, all 60 of them could get a 4. A bad day, 30 of them will get a 3. But I think they're all capable of getting a 4 and they're producing work that's at a 4. So surely I'd be putting them all down for a 4. And I went, well, I suppose we'd have to take that approach when we discuss it, because who's going to play God and decide which 30 kids are going to have a bad day in an exam which is not taking place? And I think people up and down, you know, leaders and the department in particular up and down the country will be having those wrestles with themselves until the final submission of the data sometime in May. June.
Yeah, I think, Stan?
Won't this all be moderated anyway by some sort of norm curve that will put the exams, the grades in the same normal curve as every year?
I think that'll be really challenging, because there's going to be statistical movement. I mean, as I say, I'm no statistician. There's going to have to be some expected grade inflation across the piece, because, you know, I can't see without lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of external moderation, validation, quality assurance, checking, and I don't see where the people are to do that. Can't check every school. There's going to be a small sample of schools, and probably in that small sample of schools, it might just be a certain subject area. They might say, show me the work of these 3 kids. I don't know, because we haven't had all that and exactly how it's going to go. But it would appear to say, depending on who you listen to, that, you know, unless the grades are massively out, there's going to be very little scrutiny. Well, I wish I knew the answer to that, because it would make the job of putting that process together much easier. But I suppose taking away the actual awarding of grades and how they'll be arrived at, how they'll be moderated, more important for me is that those year 11 students are in school as much as possible, learning about life. And more importantly, a lot of them will be going on to post-16 level 3. You know, a lot of those kids need to be in school and learning the material in any case to give them the best possible chance of being successful at A-level or equivalent. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that if we get bogged down in the detail of exactly what grade we're awarding them.
I think personally that I think we've got to see this as a successful transition into post-16 study. For the vast majority of kids, that's where they're going. And so I think there's a role here for teachers to ensure that, you know, that they don't overinflate it, so that kids find themselves able to get on courses where they know they're not going to be able to achieve. So I think this sort of careers element of it, guidance, is really crucial. And as you say, the longer you have them in school in the summer term, the more chance you've got of influencing them, you know, both in terms of learning, but also in terms of where they're going and what courses they might want to study.
It's crucial. What we don't want is a repeat. Obviously, without the algorithm, we won't get a repeat of some of the things that happened last year. No. You know, where there were wide reports where the kids been teacher assessed as a 3 and ended up with an 8 because of the distribution in the school.
Yeah, well, we have to say, I think Stan and I have picked this apart and said that the chance of that happening are probably more likely in the private sector than they were in the state sector. Okay. Where there was, you know, private sector, there was significantly greater grade inflation. And I understand about the pressure those staff must have felt from parents who are actually paying, you know, directly to that school. Yeah. But actually, you know, that really was lost. I think that was quickly, you know, put under the carpet. That was a very
unpleasant. I was talking about the algorithm generating a higher grade.
Yes.
So that actually been assessed by the school at a low grade.
Right.
The performance of that subject in that particular school differed year on year. There were kids that would only been entered for foundation and were getting 8s and 9s.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I heard you meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've come to the end. That's, I mean, it goes so quickly, doesn't it? But thank you very much, Jonny, for joining us this week, and have a great Easter break. And
yeah, do get a break, and for any other teachers and heads out there, find time over Easter to get a break.
Yeah, I think it is important that people get a break, and you know, the trust that I currently work with, it was very clear from a call that we were on last night. You know, we're going to leave you alone over Easter. I think that's really nice to hear when central teams say, we'll leave you alone. We'll maybe pop you the odd email, just with crucial information, but pick it up when you want. And yeah, I think
Excellent.
everybody needs it.
Very good.
Pleasure to see you both.
And you.
Cheers.
Yeah, see you all next week, folks. So yes, it'll be Stan and I next week. No guest, I don't think, next week. So anyway, thank you.